Go for it.
You should put a screen behind him.
Like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. And you just hear his, and then you just hear his voice.
Board President Gonzalez, we are streaming.
Thank you. Welcome to the Special Board of Education Student Outcomes Focused Governance Training. I call the meeting to order. Dr. Albright, may we have a roll call, please?
Janelle Astorga,
Here.
Ronaldo Tomorito, Heather Benavides, Crystal Tapia Romero,
Here.
Josefina Dominguez,
Here.
Courtney Jackson,
Here.
and Gonzalez.
Here. Our first item is to consider adoption of the February 28th, 2025 Special Board of Education Meeting SOFG Training Agenda. Can we have a motion and a second, please?
I move we accept the 2025 agenda for this special board meeting.
Can I have a second, please?
Crystal, I'll second.
We have a motion from Member Jackson and a second from Member Tapia Romero. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
and Yo Gonzalez.
Yes. Our next item is to discuss effective practices for board-led community engagement events. Our presenter is Cindy Ellsburn, Council of Great City Schools Manager of Governance Services and Governance Coach. Ms. Ellsburn, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Before we get started, I know we only have 2 hours. So what I like to do with short amount of time is to start off with some meeting standards, just to make sure that we have our time use effective and meaningful, and that we really get through what we need to get through so you all can proceed with the work you need to do. So just ask that we have time efficiency and focus, that we stay on topic, the topic that the agenda mentions. I know I often can chase down some rabbit holes, so we'll ask that you all don't take me down there. So just staying on topic would be great. We can park off-topic items for future follow-up. Being future focused and results driven is always a great thing. We can use the past to inform how we move forward. However, don't want to spend time relitigating or dwelling there, because continuous improvement, while we use the past and replaying the video to find moments to improve, we do want to move forward and do the best for the students we'll serve. And finally, and I know it goes unsaid, but we have it up here, being respectful and collaborative in our communication, just assuming positive intent. I always ask for the groups I work with to disagree with the person, or disagree with the ideas, not the individuals, and then to contribute positively. Be mindful of the energy you're bringing. And Josefina, glad you're joining us online. I know there's some positive Friday energy in the room. Hopefully you're feeling some of that where you're sitting as well. Anyone have questions or concerns about these standards before we proceed?
No.
Great. Let's start with the foundational question to just ground us. Why do school systems exist?
To improve student outcomes.
To improve student outcomes.
Yeah, to improve student outcomes. They don't exist to make sure that the construction orders were completed on time, to make sure that we have a balanced budget, to do all of those numerous things that school districts that often need to happen and are still important, but that is not the end. It's not, those are means to get to that end. And that end is to improve student outcomes, what students know and are able to do. So then, we talked about why school boards exist. There are many means to the ends. There are many ideas out there about what student outcomes, what it is that students know and should be able to do, what the system should focus on. So, and we refer to the things, those outcomes, as community's vision. And then there's also a lot of ideas about how the community would like us to get there. And those are the things that we refer to as the community's values. But we know a school system can't be effective if they're trying to be all things to all people, if they're trying to do all the things, accomplish all the goals. A system that tries to do everything does nothing. So there needs to be focus and prioritization. And that's why the school board and why you all are sitting in the seats that you are. And that focus on prioritization is really important. And it's part of what this community engagement training and best practice gets at is the representation of the vision and values of the community, of the broader community. Because that is it's not an easy thing to do, and it takes some practice in that prioritization. So school boards, we say, exist to represent the vision and the values of the community. And again, school systems exist to improve student outcomes. And these are our foundational principles. Your role as we go through this community listening will be to prioritize that vision and values. And Josefina, please don't hesitate to chime in whenever there's something that you can't hear or need to be repeated.
Thank you. No, so far so good.
Okay, great, thank you. So just for some common language around community engagement, we talk about community engagement as the two-way communication between the board and the public that occurs at a meeting hosted by the board, whereas community outreach is that two-way communication that happens at a meeting hosted by community members. And then a couple of key definitions up there are owners and then customers. So owners as the organization's moral and legal authority. So for examples up there, the residents, taxpayers, and those are the folks that the board is better positioned to serve. In your role as board members, you are doing owner service. And then there's customers, the recipients of the organization's benefits and students, staff, families, and that is where staff is better positioned to often to address the issues that come forth in that respect. So I want to dive a little deeper into the distinction between owner service and customer service. Imagine that you go to McDonald's to buy a hamburger. Are you acting as a customer or an owner? Customer, yeah. Now imagine you love that burger so much that you go home and decide to buy stock in the company. Are you a customer or an owner? Owner. Yeah, you're showing up as an owner. Difference being that with customer behavior, it's transactional. There's a transactional relationship there. McDonald's, you're buying your burger. It's focused on the immediate value. So getting that burger, filling my need, that burger is gonna satiate my hunger. And it's a shorter time horizon. It's very immediate. And then the owner behavior is that long-term relationship. It's focused on the organization's sustainability and success. And then there's a longer time horizon. in a school system or anywhere really, but especially in a school system, can the same person show up as both an owner and a customer?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. It happens often in education. And it's the board's job to make that distinction and discern which role they're playing at the time that you're making that connection with them. Any questions so far? Okay, just for fun, let's practice identifying some owner and customer behavior. Scenario 1, parent says, my child got a bad grade. I think we're treated unfairly. I voted for you. So what are you going to do about it? What type of behavior is that person displaying? Owner or customer? Customer behavior. Right. They're focused on that immediate transactional value. Like I need something done for my student. So what's the response when they're showing up in that way? How will
Refer them to the administration.
refer them to the administration? Why?
Because they handle the customers.
They're the expert of what happened at the school, in the classroom, with the teacher, the assignment. We
Yeah,
have
but
no idea.
they're the expert of what happened at that level. It's a
Mhm.
matter of expertise.
Mhm.
And also positioning to actually address the issue. And then what if they go to that teacher or to that administrator and don't get the resolution that they expected? This is where it can become tricky.
Well, I think they need to continue working
Right.
within the administrative chain of command, right? Like if you went to the teacher, you don't get the answer, then you need to go to the principal, and then like you don't come to the board member.
Yeah, so it's working through that chain of command, through the system. And it's also remembering that sometimes an issue can be addressed. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but an issue can be addressed in a way that doesn't necessarily yield what the person wanted. And that to some degree has to be okay. Because again, the system cannot be everything to everybody. Now that I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of when and where that isn't okay, but at the highest level, the point of service is where you want to point the customer service issues, and for you all, that's generally administration. And then owner issues are for the board. So scenario 2, do another one. A community member says, I'm sure you hear this all the time, to be able to compete in a global economy should be adept in multiple languages. I think these are important skills. Owner behavior or customer behavior.
Customer. Oh, I'm saying customer.
Oh, I said owner.
I know.
Have one owner, one customer.
Oh, we're gonna have to debate.
Customer? Why? Why? I guess why are you saying yeah? Why are you saying customer?
I'm saying customer because they're representing their own perspective, not yet the vision and values of the whole community. When it becomes broader, then it becomes.
Got it. So right now they're identifying their own interest, but it would need to be in a broader engagement setting for it to be
They're just saying they like tomatoes on their burger. Someone might eat tomatoes.
Got it. So they are saying they like tomatoes. Somebody else might like tomatoes on their burger. How about you?
Well, I think once you're trying to give a perspective of what you feel is best for your child, your student, it's still within the customer framework. it's not a choice that's being made for the district as a whole. You're just speaking from one point of view.
Yeah, so you're speaking from one point of view, it's not a choice for the district. What if the person doesn't have a child in school? So they're
I still
not
say it's
speaking to
customer.
speaking to their own child's needs, they're just,
It's still a customer because you're speaking for the students who are customers at the school.
okay. Courtney, you said owner, why?
Dun, dun, dun.
No, well, can I take it back?
No,
Uh, No, I said owner because I went straight. Yeah, motion to reconsider. Can I table this? I went straight to the value proposition that you were engaging in. And so I went straight to, well, this person is representing like a value. They're trying to bring us a value statement. And in that sense, we do represent the values. And so in like the larger sense, if this person was presenting on behalf of my congregation, this is our value, this is what we want to see, then to me, it starts to become part of more the owner aspect. So I think it's like the question of how is this information presented to me as a board member? Is it presented as a singular conversation, which could be customer? Is it presented as part of a larger outreach engagement session? Could be a value statement.
Yeah, so you're wondering if the way in which it was presented to you, whether it was a one-on-one conversation or if it was a part of a larger listening campaign on behalf of the board, if that changes whether or not it's a value statement or a vision statement. Well, and so this person is saying students need to be able to compete in a global economy and be adept in multiple. Is that a short-term or long-term outcome?
It's long-term.
So a long-term vision about what students should know or be able to do. Now, if they said, I think there needs to be a Chinese language course in every high school. So
That's
that my
custom.
student can learn Chinese.
That's more customer.
More customer.
That's telling the superintendent how she needs to do her job.
Yeah, so thinking of it more in, so what I would say in scenario 2 is that it's more owner behavior because they're thinking long range overall. And while as the board hears that, or the board member or board hears that, if you were to hear that in your listening session, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be able to offer students multiple languages so that they're proficient in multiple languages. However, that is more of an owner statement that you all will consider as you prioritize. And any questions on that, or is that clicking?
so based on their suggestion, that would require us then to go change policy. Because then that's when it becomes owner. If we're not doing that, then I would question if it would stay within the customer realm and it's directed directly to the superintendent and her team.
So that, I think the distinction there is that the board, if the board is doing this listening, if the board is engaging the community and the community member or if they're showing up and telling the board wherever they're showing up, telling the board that they think that this would be a valuable what students know be able to do, being ready for a global economy by being adept in multiple languages. The board, that still lies in the ownership realm with the board, even though the board might not be able to prioritize that. Now, if the superintendent, when she goes out to determine how are we going to reach whatever goals you all have decided, and honor whatever values that are in your goals and guardrails, and goes on a strategic, on a community listening endeavor to understand more what the community and what stakeholders want in the how we get there, then, and she hears that we want multiple languages for our students, that might be something she chooses to, in a customer service realm, create strategy around. So when it comes to the board, but the questions are going to be different. Also, the board is going to be seeking that owner information when you go out on these listening campaigns. Superintendent would be seeking the how type of information, if as you might, if the superintendent chooses to engage the community in that. Josefina, thank you.
Yes, in this particular case, I think to bring it back to our work here in Albuquerque, how would you suggest tying it? I mean, it strikes me as an opportunity to teach about our particular goal, which is number 3, post-secondary readiness.
So if somebody came with the idea of having multiple languages for being ready for a global economy, that would speak to your goal?
Particularly our interim goals, which we've recently, I think, we or I certainly have realized that we need to do a better job about informing or reporting back to the community about. So in this particular case, if someone raises the issue of language, it's an opportunity for us to address or to teach about, report back about how we're looking to increase the number of recipients of bilingual seals.
Yeah. So now I hear what you're saying. So I think when there are education opportunities for the board to do that, and I use this scenario. This is kind of a generic scenario I use. So the fact that it actually relates to one of your interim goals, I wasn't expecting that, and probably should have. But I think that using that as an educational opportunity, I think the board being able to communicate with the community around what your goals are and how they're being measured and how that relates, I think that is a point at which you could use that for an educational opportunity, and then just letting them know that is something that the board monitors as part of that, and that you do it in a public space and point them to the meetings and or the past monitoring reports or whatever it is that would help educate them in what is already happening. Is that responsive to your question?
Yeah, yes. Yes, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for bringing that up.
I think, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's actually more illustrative to try the reverse. Because I think where Crystal and I got stuck was one person's perspective, even if it is long-term, versus representing the whole community. So if we had someone say, in the long term, for us to be successful in a global economy, we need to make America as strong as it can be. And the best way to make America as strong as it could be is to focus on America first and English only. And so we need to get rid of all of the other languages. That's still a long-term
It is.
perspective. But I think, so that's kind of where I was like, well, that's definitely a customer. That's their opinion. It doesn't represent the whole community. So can you speak to like the distinction between long-term versus short-term and then individual versus like when might something like, if that's a, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So when you go out and listen, you're going to hear you're going to hear all of, those varying perspectives because
Speed up that example.
right. No, but so you will and competing and conflicting ideas. I mean, that is just the nature the of the community. I mean, there's going to be different ideas. There's just going to be different leanings, all sorts of different opinions out there. And you might hear the scenario that I brought up about, yes, we need to have more languages, or you might hear we need English only, and that's that. The board, when you're listening and doing your listening based on, and you're going to have, it'll be very important to have questions that are open-ended, but they still might yield those types of responses. Your job in that moment is to just take that information down and they got it. So you believe that we should only have English in our schools or whatever it is, neither agree nor disagree. But then when all of that information comes back, what the board does is it's not looked at in a vacuum. First of all, the feedback or the input that you receive from your community listening will be synthesized such that common themes might come forward. And then additionally, you're also going to be looking at that information not on its own, but along with student performance data and other information that you have as board members in order to make those or in order to prioritize what it is that you do with it. So yeah, you might hear those things, and those might still be owner issues and in the long term, this is what we want to see for students 10, 20 years out. And then those short-term, immediate transactional, I can see where those can also be the same, like stop teaching right at this moment. But again, that's, if it's coming as a customer issue, then they can be directed toward administration. And is that responsive to your question?
It is, but I guess I think it is just the question of like, how do we respond to what? Because our own opinions and biases come to play. Like if
Yeah.
I agreed with the first perspective, I'd be like, yes, you are an owner. But if I didn't agree with the second perspective, I'd be like, you are a customer.
Can I respond?
Yeah, go.
So what I think the point that I think you're trying to make, and I think that Danielle is also trying to make, is that there are instances where we are individuals, but when we work as a board, we are one entity. So even though we are all sitting here with varying views,
Mhm.
when we are acting when we are acting as a board, those thoughts, biases, political leanings, whatever, have to be put aside for what the collective community is telling us. And so I think what Danielle is trying to say is we as board members have to be cognizant of when we are individuals, Courtney Jackson at the grocery store, and when I'm a board member, and how my words and my what I say can be interpreted. That even here's an example. I'm a parent too, right? So when I go to my kid's school, I have to be very cognizant of I have my parent hat on today, even though everybody knows that I'm a board member, right? So we have to be very particular about understanding how we work collectively as a board and leave our individual concerns out of it. I think is what maybe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that your scenario of being both a parent and a board member and understanding which hat you're wearing when you are walking into your child's school, I think that's important. Although be cognizant that you will always have your board member hat
Yes.
on as far as anybody else is concerned. And that it is hard to ever take off that board member hat. And being cognizant as well while we are individuals, just understanding what the consequence even of our individual of whatever our social media posts, whatever we do, could be behaviors that make it harder for our school system to be successful. Josefina?
So could you give us an example of, I mean, it strikes me that our best response, but I'm trying to formulate it, is to go back to what, the goals and the guardrails that that 2,000 community members informed. And so even if we're getting these questions, what kind of answer could you give that redirects, that reflects back the view that we should only be teaching, we should have an English only approach, reflecting back that sentiment, yes, I heard you, and in 5 years we're going to revisit these goals, and I mean that's where my brain is going, and in 5 years or maybe 3 more years we will revisit the goals and the guardrails, and we look forward to you weighing in at that point.
Yeah, and I think that so I think that reflecting back, I hear that you are wanting no other languages taught, whatever the comment is that they say, and saying, we are both hearing what they're saying and also letting them know what it is that this information is informing and how it's being used or how it has been used is always a good way to close that communication loop and to be transparent about, right now we're going out, we're informing you, whatever the purpose of the community engagement is that you're doing, whether it is to reaffirm and educate about the goals and guardrails that you already have, to hear if there's any major transition in community vision and values, whatever it is, to be transparent about how you plan to use the information, whether it be we are noting this and in 3 years we'll be revisiting it, or this is input that we're continuously collecting. Please continue to watch us monitor the goals and guardrails that we have. Whatever that end is that you have for your community listening, that goal that you have for your community listening, being very transparent with the community up front about what you plan to do with the information, and not only telling them what you plan to do with it, but then going back and closing that loop to say, here's what we heard and here's what we've done or haven't done with that information is important.
I think we do a good job. We're working on it.
Thank you for that question. So any questions before we continue on that customer owner service piece, why that distinction matters. We want to wait for,
I think we can keep moving.
okay, sounds good. The other piece, I want to mention is that having that distinguishing between customer and owner service and behavior, and the board being seated and keeping that mindset of owner service versus customer service lends to that cycle of accountability. If I, as a board member, decide that I'm going to do customer service, then the accountability, I'm inserting myself or the board, whether I be a board member or the board does it, inserts themselves into that customer service, and then the accountability, being able to hold the superintendent accountable, that that also is, you risk that ability. Oh, and I think this, a version of this cycle of accountability is also in the handout that you all were had for today's meeting. Okay, also in today's reading, there was a statement that I want to spend a little time with, because I think this also can be a tricky when we're board members. And I come at this, I don't think I mentioned, I know I didn't mention today, I am a former board member, so have sat in your seats and know how tricky and sticky this can be, because we are very much servant minded, and so it can be hard. The prioritization, representing through prioritization, can be difficult. But the statement I wanted to bring up was that the board cannot act, nor should they, on every interest of the community, but the board can and should act in the interest of the community. A distinction the board must both understand and communicate. So I think that also speaks to that idea of those competing interests and conflicting interests, that the board is going to need to prioritize and represent not individual interests, but the interests of the community, broader community. What does that statement mean to any of you? When you see that, what does it mean to you?
I can go.
Go ahead.
Honestly, that is a statement of relief. That because I think when you're first elected, you think I have to do everything that everybody in my community asks me to do. I have to show up to everything. I have to represent their interests. I have to go to the superintendent with absolutely everything that I ever hear. But once you become comfortable in your role as to what the board does and what the superintendent does, that statement kind of gives you the authority to say, I represent the community as a whole. It doesn't mean that you individual, that what you're bringing to me isn't important, but I will act as the conduit to help you get where you need to go. So
Yeah, so you find it to be a relief that that it relieves some of the stress of having to bring everything forward or be the everything for everyone type.
yeah. And it requires me to have integrity in what my role is as a board member,
Yeah.
right? It's a requirement. I have to understand what my role is, and my role is there's a distinction.
Well, I think when I was originally elected on the board, I probably thought this statement.
Sure.
And or even running for office, thought this is what our role was, or we were 100% wrong. And knowing that, and I'm thankful we were able to be guided on that early on, really allowed us to be more precise and effective in the decisions we're making and allow us to realize that we can't be everything to everyone. And it allowed our focus to be much more precise.
Yeah, so
Because before it was wild. The emails, the phone calls, and now I'm just like, oh no, you need to go. I have the student center right there pulled up for you. So it's a relief.
yeah, so I think that that's not uncommon to come onto the board thinking this is what you are meant to do.
Mhm.
And but yeah, the ability to communicate that as and to understand it as a board member and does allow the ability to bring focus to the work that you do need to do. And I heard relief, I think, again.
Mhm.
Yep.
Well, I was working more hours on school board than my regular paying job. And that was crazy. We'll just say that.
Yeah, yeah,
Not efficient.
No, bad idea.
not craziness.
I think it relates to the stage 4 of the community engagement, which is where we're heading.
Mhm.
But the whole piece around training and untraining of the community and ourselves is where I really struggled. Because at the very beginning, like we're moving into SOFG, we're saying we are at this level, we're not doing the superintendent work. And yet there's this expectation from the entire community of something totally different. It's not just that we had an expectation, it's that that the community has an expectation. And indeed, I think our predecessors acted in that way. Like I would get calls and they'd be like, well, the person in the seat before you would do this. And I
Mhm.
was like, well, sorry.
Yeah.
So, but like, just the sequencing of the training of the community is hard because I feel like if we could have or front loaded that more, I think that would help.
Yeah, so front loading that, yeah, and now moving forward, as you continue to work, in your next steps of the work that you are doing, going through that phase, going toward that phase 4, looking at the community engagement calendar that you've adopted, the purpose for your phase 4 engagement, and really focusing in on it is a constant cycle of educating the community because the community is big and vast. And when you think about the people who every year you're going to have more people cycling in who are interested for various reasons. I mean, that can be the nature of education anyway. You have a whole new crew of parents every year who might be coming on and starting to pay attention. And it's, yeah, the education, the learning and unlearning for the community is constant. So I think you have an opportunity to really lean into helping them understand as you go into these next phases what the board is and isn't and what the board does and doesn't. And the community, generally speaking, it might not be there might be community members who do not like it, but that's okay.
Right.
It's the communication and the transparency of it. And if you're consistent and uh, and staying within your role as board members, then that transparency and trust is actually built on a stronger foundation than if you were pretending that you could do everything for everyone and being yes people to those folks and doing what we refer to as superintendent work.
Can I say
Go
something?
ahead, Courtney.
Well, I think, yes, it's hard. However, at the end of the day, what our community asked us to do was that, right, were the goals. And what I think is going to happen, and I'm 99% sure what's going to happen is that they've asked us to do that. So if we can stay strong in our understanding of what our role is and what maintain our focus on monitoring and staying on that, the goals are going to start, we are going to start to hit the goals. And yes, there's going to be people there's always going to be that 10% of people that you're just not going to make happy no matter what. But once we start achieving those goals, the broader community it's going to click for them of, oh, there's been chaos for 35 years, but now suddenly we're clicking towards our goals and our students are actually achieving. Maybe what the board is doing is better. And so, but the hard part is it becomes incumbent upon us as 7 individuals in a massive community to stand strong and say, no, this is what my job is. And believe me, you want me to be focused here. You don't want me chasing curriculum changes at such and such elementary school. That's not where you want my focus.
Josefina.
I really appreciate your comment that it is incumbent on the board to lean into. And then the rest of it, I'll summarize as teaching our community and reiterating exactly what board member Jackson said. Anytime I clarify what our role is, people appreciate it. They do, as long as I'm leading with, the goals and the guardrails. I think where we're running into a little bit of trouble is with the guardrails, the interims. I think that surfaced in a recent conversation amongst ourselves. And so I'm more deliberate about that now. But I think that needs some tweaking and some real conversation on this board about how to teach that piece of it. Because we've got 5 guardrails, and I believe, remind me, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, do they each have 2 interim? I don't believe
3 interims.
3 for each guardrail. So that becomes a handout. But again, it's about helping the public stay focused on, what we're doing. But again, leaning into, and it's how we explain, I don't tell people, well, that's not my job. It's more like, I have a handout. And this is superintendent's work. This is board work, taken from our governance manual. But it's, again, just, I think people appreciate the clarification, and it depends on how it's delivered, but they've appreciated. I have yet to get, well, I might have gotten one pushback, but it's minor.
Yeah. So that clarity is kind. It and people do. I think that is something that in general community members clarification is appreciated. Who else? What anything else about this statement or this idea, and then about the board and individual board members being very mindful of what their role is as they're engaging, because a lot of the community engagement that you're going to be doing is board board engagement, which we'll talk a little bit more about the components of successful board engagement. But there are always going to be times where you're interacting with stakeholders as individuals, and keeping that clarity around what the board decisions have made. It's that one voice principle. The board speaks with one voice. The message is the same. Once a decision is made. And so being mindful of that is really helpful.
With that said, I do think it would help to have the board and board members cannot act on every interest of the community.
Ah,
Because I think we all think it's not us as the individual member. And we also think like, oh yeah, for sure, as a whole board, we're doing this. But when you actually think about it as a member, I think it does push us more to think about our own responsibility and our own actions.
yeah, I appreciate that point. So as board members also, yeah, that understanding that the board, I am an individual, but the board this is the work that the board has determined, and this is the work that we are moving forward with. And board members, and that's that one voice principle about moving forward with the decisions of the board, even if I didn't agree with it, that is a critical governing principle, so that it also fosters that trust among community members. Because if there's still different messaging, if there's any even if it's unintentional, where I am still iterating, I on the board voted against something, but the majority voted differently, whatever it is, and then I'm still out there relitigating my own opinion, even though the board has spoken. That I've witnessed it. I've been a part of that as a board member, where it is not helpful, and it actually, while I might be making, I'm using this in my own experience. I'm replaying my own video. I was the hero to a small group of folks, and I really undermined forward progress for the entire district because I didn't, I continued to not support the voice of the board. So that, wow, I'm just having a momentary inward reflection right now on a time many years ago. But that, yeah, so,
Well, I think it's important that you do say it because it has happened as of recent, and for me, it's important that we address to not just say the right thing when we're all together, but we truly do the right thing when we're operating in our communities and in meetings. And personally, that's where I've seen the biggest disconnect. And I struggle when people say the right thing in a meeting and for the sake of getting through this training. And I'll be honest, it bothers me all 7 of us aren't here. I'll say that out for everybody because it was extremely difficult for me personally to make it to be here. And I feel like this type of training is beneficial for everybody to take a part in, especially because we are living community engagement as we speak. This is truly what we're doing. And many times what is being communicated outside of that, it is not cohesive to what the board has decided as a whole. And I just want to be clear because I know this is our first interaction. My style has always been, I just kind of say truly how I feel. And I don't want to sugarcoat things and say, oh yeah, we're all on the same page when the reality is we're not. And we've had this training before, and to know that we're repeating it again, I'm like, okay, guys, we really need to do what we're supposed to be doing and not have our own interpretation or based on who's in front of us. What we're saying is changing. So just my
Yeah.
thoughts.
yeah. So, one of the things, and I mentioned it to Christy, and I'll say it out loud here. Since this is streamed, I'd imagine it will be a video. My recommendation is going to be for the board members who were not able to attend is that they watch the video, and then follow up with me or Ashley afterwards, just to make sure that everyone that they have the same understanding that you all will come away with, and just to follow up on any questions that they might have and weren't here to answer or to have answered or ask.
Yeah.
But yeah, things are definitely more effective when the entire governing body can be here. And absent that, we'll try to catch folks up. But it is critically important that, and that one voice, that is one voice principle, and that is what I would call a universal governing principle. It's not unique to student outcomes focused governance, not unique to Albuquerque Public Schools. It is an aspect of effective governance, because you all actually, I would imagine there is law on the books, code on the books, that you operate as a body corporate or body politic. And in order to do that, that is the way that, once the board it's not individual board members, the board has spoken. And so individual board members, making statements or having conversations that conflict with the decision of the board just is not helpful, and doesn't make the board, it's not an efficient body corporate action or behavior.
I want to go back to what you said earlier about trust, because I think that's the biggest thing that helped me with this quote. Is coming in, there was a lot of changes that I wanted to make, just because like that's, what I saw that needed. And being able to really look through that and understand that it's a partnership between the superintendent and the school board member was really important, because you hear a lot of like, well, you're the board member, like you can tell the superintendent what to do, right? But understanding that that is the person with the expertise has helped me a lot in just decision making and what it looks like, especially when we're working as a board and we're all getting the same information, and being able to really dissect that in a way that it's not just for this community or not just for my schools, right? It's the whole district. So that has been very helpful, where it's not just I'm your boss or I'm the owner. This is a partnership where we have to work together to make sure that we are making those long-term goals.
Yeah, because you are the governing team. So the collaborative aspect is important, because as the board, you are the community experts, and as the superintendent, you are the educational expert, educational and operational expert. And so that collaboration, informing each other and having that dialogue and whatnot, is that type of leadership stability, even if there are points of disagreement, maintaining some sort of stability as far as the type of interactions you have. It also is so the board is a culture setting body, even more so than a policy setting body. What happens in the boardroom is echoed in the classroom. So how you behave with each other, how you behave with your superintendent, is what you can expect to see reflected all the way throughout the organization and into the classroom. So if people are watching, like I don't know what the stats are on your meetings and the viewership, but typically across the country, and I would imagine would be fairly true here. Who watches your meetings? What is the largest group? Staff. Yeah.
My husband.
Or Ricardo.
Yeah. So, and I think you wouldn't want your, the way you want your students treated by their teachers is the way you all want to, you want how you treated your superintendent and how you are treating each other here to be modeled you want to be modeled like that culture setting model. Yeah.
To build off both Janelle's point about trust
Yeah.
and Courtney's about who we are in the community, I think we also have to recognize that what we say and what we do and how we act has implications for the superintendent and her ability to do her job.
Mhm.
And when we criticize a board vote or the outcome of a vote or the process of the vote or the information that we received prior to a vote, that is criticism of this, or can be perceived at, but I think is criticism of the district and the superintendent and can have real implications. And so I think we all need to agree that going forward, we won't have situations in which three of us go before a community group with a PowerPoint with all of our complaints about past votes.
Mm.
Like, we just can't do that. We do have to agree, like, to stick to this for the sake of our superintendent and her job, so that she can get the goals done.
Yeah, and what I would say to that is if w- this work is about being effective, right, on behalf of your students. And there are some behaviors that are going to help that, and there are some behaviors that are going to harm that. Just like the guidance that we had way at the beginning, what I would say is that forward-looking and solution-driven, relitigating past board decisions, relitigating what information you were given, use that to inform how, using that to inform the future as a board, is acceptable, I would say. But I think relitigating it, and especially relitigating it in the public, could be a harmful thing. And I think that there are spaces that you all could create, not to relitigate, but to understand how the board is going to operate moving forward. And to ensure that the board is getting the information that it needs. The board is, because again, you're a body, a governing body, and only the board has the authority. Okay. So again, just to recap a little bit about making the distinction about not acting on every community interest, and then in turn acting in the interest of the community. Just remembering that the board governs, it doesn't manage, and that allows the superintendent and staff to handle those operational issues effectively, and leverage their expertise and ability to respond. And then it also ensures that issues are addressed at the point of service, and where they're most effectively addressed. Or the board is the furthest from day-to-day operations and from that point of service. And so if a community member has to come to a board member to have an issue resolved, that's also an access thing. Like if I can only get my issue resolved because I have access to a board member, that is not, that actually breeds inequity within the system. It doesn't allow the system to respond. And when those issues are directed to the most effective place, that's a critical systems feedback mechanism. So when issues are resolved by board members or individually rather than at a systems level, then the opportunity for the superintendent and staff to identify root causes or make widespread systems changes that might benefit the larger, the entire district are lost. So it's an opportunity cost thing there too. And then again, the whole support of long-term stability, that sustainability and long-term strategy and long-term vision can really be undermined by reactive decisions made due to short-term pressure. So the one thing, and we talked about clarification of this. And so I think some of the things as you go forward with your community, it is, again, the board's responsibility to communicate these things. So setting those clear expectations, publicly explaining what the board's governance role is versus the superintendent's management role, using the board policy and procedure as a guide. So whatever it is you've determined as far as that point of service or chain of command and how the board members are going to respond to individual concerns or constituent concerns that are not owner issues, use that as your guide. That's why you have it. And then engaging transparently, can still actively listen, but explain the governance role. I think Josefina, you brought that up. And then educating the stakeholders, providing that regular training for the community on the governance best practices. Josefina, I see your hand.
Yes, something you said just prompted a question for me. And I think it had to do with ensuring that the board gets the info it needs. So that has, I think that the lack of information on something that came before the board has made things difficult on two issues. But how do you view that? How do you coach on that? Because if the board is going to vote on a topic, and for us, it's charter schools and say, because I'm going to give you specifics so we don't dance around the issue. So on charter schools, we have to vote whether to renew or introduce a new charter to the district.
Great to interrupt. I just wanna
Except,
make sure that we're sticking on community engagement and outreach and not board information.
okay, so on that, in that vein, if you'll indulge me a little bit of explanation, because the community comes to us and says, what, why did you vote this way? So there's a quandary there. Topics that come before our board for a vote, how do we blend everything that you have laid out for us? And for me, it's the goals and the guardrails, right? And now it's more nuanced because it's the interims. So how do we blend that? I mean, that's what I'm trying to do with, it was right sizing and, we're consolidating schools that we have to because of enrollment. But there's a misunderstanding about in the community about what our role is with regard to that, to both those topics.
Okay. So, and I do want to make sure that we stay on topic for your sunshine laws and all of that. In respect to um community engagement and deciphering your role in various decisions, whether they be customer service, making that distinction between customer service and owner service. I guess my general answer is making that distinction between board work and superintendent work. So the board's work is the goals and the guardrails and whatever is legally required of them. And even when, if the board is required legally to vote on these charters, then having the information necessary to make that vote is important. However, that is something, and please correct me, anybody, superintendent, if I'm wrong. That work has been delegated to the superintendent to make those recommendations around closure, non-closure, whatever that topic is. So to some degree, it is upholding the superintendent's recommendations based on their alignment of resources toward accomplishing the goals and honoring the guardrails. And then also, to some degree, if community needs more clarification on the why, that too can be a point them back to the point of service, to the administrative information, and that why this decision is being made. So that's just kind of a very general, not knowing, but the goals and the guardrails being that decision-making lens that the board uses, and that the superintendent helps explain decisions to the degree possible, or recommendations. And what was the other question? Was there another question?
No, I mean, I think in general, that is, I think you've answered
Okay.
the questions.
Yep. And oh, I know. I think the other thing that I wanted to touch on, because I heard about the interim guardrails, and one thing that just to remind everyone, while interim guardrails are important for the board to know and to be able to communicate, and to have an understanding of, and those are the pieces of information that you're monitoring, whether or not the superintendent is honoring those values that are protected by the guardrails. And it's in the Student Outcomes Focused Governance Manual that the interim guardrails belong to the superintendent and stand as their interpretation of the guardrails. So the board doesn't change those. And I don't know if you were suggesting that or not, but
No, it's reporting it is what I'm getting.
as a reminder that often, I often like to bring up as well.
I have a question.
Yes. I do want to say, just for clarification, what was especially helpful in your response to your explanation was, and correct me if I'm wrong, that for us, it's a question of asking if the alignment of resources is happening in a way that honors goals and guardrails in whatever decision.
Yeah, that goals and guardrails become the lens by which the board questions various recommendations and decisions. And that can be applied to the degree possible. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a question around the interim guardrails because this was a conversation that just came up for me when I was speaking with the community member around funding. And we have a guardrail around equitable funding, right? And they were unaware about the interim guardrails and the specificity of how the superintendent interprets what that meant.
Yep.
So in their mind, it was like, well, she's not doing a good job because this is the guardrail, you know? So I think it is important for board members to be able to at least say, well, we have this interpretation, these are the interims, and this is what we're following, so that those confusions don't happen as well. So
Yes.
that's just something that I feel like needs to be shared.
Yeah, and that is something that you can definitely, as you are in that phase 4 of your community engagement, is share how that is, how you are, how the superintendent is measuring them, that's their interpretation, and that is the evidence that they're bringing to show that they are honoring or honoring the guardrails and protecting those values. So it is, yeah, communicating and helping communicating them, even though you don't own them, but communicating them as this is how we are checking in along the way. Yep. And making sure that our goals and guardrails aren't just in a binder somewhere gathering dust and our pretty statements that we said we were going to say. Any questions before we continue on? So, in preparing for your community engagement and outreach sessions, let's review some aspects of creating successful community listening campaigns. First, they're led by board members. Why not staff? Why does it matter that they're led by board members?
Because we're the ones that are listening, actively listening for the vision and values of the community.
Yeah, the board is the board actively listens for the vision and values of the community. Anyone else? Why? Why does this matter?
It's crucial that we're getting feedback and insight from our community members. And it gives us an opportunity to have those two-way conversations that we're not able to have in the boardroom.
Yeah. So it actually gives board members the opportunity to have the two-way conversations. Staff cannot have them on their behalf. It's a different conversation if staff is having it. And it is if you are actually going to represent the vision and values of the community, you actually have to do the listening. Yeah. Having a representative community of owners. What does this mean? And how does it happen?
What? So we just actually had a community engagement ad hoc committee meeting, and this was actually brought up by the superintendent, and it's an excellent point. We have to make sure that when we go out to the community, that we are going to the whole community, that we're not just spending our time in the schools. Because to superintendent's point was, it's not just the schools, it's not just the staff, it's not just the parents that are directly affiliated with the schools, it's all of Albuquerque. And so it's crucial that when we're doing these engagement and outreach events, that we are representative of a broad base, not just those that are easiest to get to. Did I accurately say what you said? Okay.
Yeah. So ensuring that you're getting representation at your listening sessions from the whole community, not just schools, not just certain segments, but representing. If you're going to represent this is a public school system. If you're going to be able to represent, you do need to have that broad reach and not just those that are easy to access. or folks that are easy to access. So how does that happen? Who's responsible for doing that, for making sure that happens?
We are,
We are.
Yeah.
not the staff,
Yep. Not, you are not the staff.
not Christy.
So if the board gets done listening and says group XYZ wasn't included, who's responsible?
We are.
Word.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. So the board decides who the community is. The board decides who they are outreaching and engaging, and only the board can do that. So be intentional, be thorough, do as much as you possibly can in order to ensure that you are getting some representation from, you're not going to get, what's the population of Albuquerque? All, and I'm not the only one. You're not going to get everybody, but getting that representative group. Yes, Josefina.
Yes, so this is, so let me turn the question around a little bit. Then what is the appropriate role of staff for community engagement?
So I think the staff could play a supporting role in if you need locations in some of that logistical stuff, you're clearly going to need to, if you wanted to have a meeting here, you're going to need to have staff help you organize and do all the logistical things for this. I think there are some of those things that can be done by staff. However, whatever is typical of your staff support, it's the main piece or pieces that are the board's responsibility are making that decision about who it is that they're including, who's being included, and how they're going to reach them, and then actually doing the listening and not having not abdicating that responsibility to staff to go and do it on your behalf.
So I would just add that we do have a guardrail around use of staff time. So just maintain a board guardrail. So making sure we're sticking to that too. And I know Courtney has a point. I just wanted to acknowledge that we're at the about 30-minute mark and just see how we're doing in terms of content versus time.
We're good. We're doing
good?
well. We're on track.
Yeah. So I was just gonna kind of put an exclamation point on what you said. The role of the staff should really just be basic logistics. Yep. The role of the board is getting people to the events, reaching out to people in your community, doing the advertising, making the calls, reaching out to other people. What we are lucky to have is a diverse group of board members. I can go to Janelle if I need to, maybe to hear, let's be blunt, a different side of the political spectrum, right? If I want to hear that, which I probably need to hear, and to Janelle's credit, she's come with me, right? So we have to reach out to each other as well to say, I'd really like to go and hear. So, but again, that is my job to do. And so that's the exclamation point.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, and that you do have a guardrail on staff use of staff time, and that is often how you will coach the work to be done is for staff's role to be very minimal in that necessary logistical, words are hard today. It's the altitude. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad I needed an excuse. But yeah, getting the rooms, reserving the rooms. That's the word I was looking for. That was a hard word for me, to reserve rooms or whatever it is. But the calling, the reaching out, all of that, the board doing that work can be actually very can actually be very meaningful. And it's, I think sometimes can become very appreciative of the staff and the work, like what it takes to support a board. But also, I think the community, the fact that the board is actually digging in, rolling up their sleeves, and doing that work, I think that also communicates something to your community as well.
The staff time, I mean, are we talking about school site staff as well? Because I mean, if we're trying to get to, in our case, the first two goals require a lot of, well, even the first three, getting to a very diverse group, right? And school site staff are a critical piece in that. So it
Norm,
just,
not engaging directly with staff.
So let me make sure I'm clear. You're talking about wanting to make sure building level staff might come to a listening session, or
I'm saying, does staff, when we measure staff time, do we include site level staff? Yeah, I mean, how
I would recommend that site level staff time is also inclusive, because it is about, I mean, any time that the board takes from staff is time taken away from actually serving kids, accomplishing goals, honoring guardrails. So that would be included in that staff time count. I think and unless there is something that I'm missing here, I think that working in collaboration with the superintendent around, and I think my microphone keeps going out. Collaborating with the superintendent around any site-based needs you would have if you had to have a session at a school or whatever. I think working that out in that respect would be the best bet.
and so what I'm hearing is there's an opening here for, I mean, the implication is that we would not want to access schools for engagement, to minimize that, to minimize staff time imposing on them. But then it means also that if we're going to go outside of schools, and what draws parents, what I've noticed, what draws parents is if their kids are performing, if they're somehow part of the engagement. Otherwise, we're left. What I'm hearing is that we've got to explore community centers, libraries as options for community engagement.
I think those are things that you can explore. I think my point around I don't think that, if I'm understanding your guardrail correctly around staff time, it's not that you can't use staff time. It's just to minimize use of staff time to the degree possible. And then I think anything at a building level, the superintendent is your conduit toward anything that might need to happen if you were to have something at a school. If you determine that you needed to have something, for example, at a school in each region or whatever, in order to draw folks, or in conjunction with something else. I mean, I think all of that can happen, but just being mindful of your staff time use guardrail, and then always your point of contact is always the superintendent as far as any other staff. And that, yeah, and I'm guessing these are all things that you'll be talking about as you move forward with next steps in community engagement. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we'll clarify those things.
Okay. Is that helpful, Josefina?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So, then we talk about board members working in pairs. Why does this matter? Why would we want that? Or why would that be the most effective way to go about it?
If you're by yourself, you're in bad company.
If you're by yourself, you're in bad company.
It's an AJism.
That is an AJism. Or you're doing what?
Meaning.
Campaigning. Yep, that is an AJism. But it's, yeah.
Well, it's so that you have 4 years, like it's that way we're going to capture more of what the community is actually saying to us, and you're not listening to what they're telling you through your own filter. You have somebody else there to also listen and comprehend and, you know, gather what is being said to you. So to have 2 people there, it's a good balance, and it amplifies the two-way communication that is important and is missing when the public just shows up to our meetings.
Yeah, yeah. So it helps having the 4 years, like you mentioned, and helps to actually be able to gather more of the information. It helps to it provides a balance in, you know, one of you might be asking the questions, the other might be noting the answers. It just is helps with a little bit of division of labor, but also capturing the listening, doing the listening that it helps to do the listening that you're out to do. The other thing, and you two kind of brought it up when you talked about sometimes you might go to, she might call you to come to her district or vice versa. What we often recommend is that you do spend time in districts that are not your own.
It's crossing the river.
I am.
Crossing the river.
I'll be there on Monday.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great.
West side.
Yeah.
Don't
do that.
No.
We'll strike that from the minute.
Okay. So, so doing that, if you are, who do you represent as a board? Just your individual district?
District
The whole
as a
community.
whole.
Yeah. So if I spend all my time in my own district, do I have any idea of what's, have I spent the time to really engage with and have the benefit of personally hearing from the rest of the folks and the rest of the community that I'm also here to represent? That is an important piece. And while I, as a board member from a district, can bring concerns, it is, of constituents in my district, it is much more meaningful for other board members to hear and interact directly.
I think there's also, it adds accountability to make
Yeah.
sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Yes, it does add accountability. Yep, and it keeps and as we get to that point number 5, I think using that common script with specific questions, it helps. You can help each other stay on script. And that system-wide focus that was right before that the whole idea of going into other districts that are not our own, that helps bring it to that system-wide focus versus what's happening in our own segment of the in our own electoral district, I guess. So why does the common script with specific questions matter? Why would we want that?
This one again. Okay, I can take this one again. Okay, so I think 2 things. And I'm just going off of like what we have done.
Mhm.
So for our like broader engagement events, we have absolutely always worked off of a common script with specific questions. And it helps because that makes sure that no matter where we are in the city, we're asking the same questions to receive the same set of feedback. And so it's a nice way of knowing that things aren't being changed based on where you are in the city.
Right.
Now, one thing that I've noticed is, so we just did a smaller event where we did district level events where there were seven of us went out to our own individual. Now, the thought behind that was kind of, make it your own.
Mhm.
However, I think what happened with Make It Your Own is it really became Make It Your Own, right? And so the premise behind it was we need to go out and hear from our community, what be the vessel to receive information from our community was the premise behind it, so that at each district level we could then give that information to the superintendent and to the board, right? To your point of, I know very well what's going on in District 7, but I might not know what's going on in District 5. And so it's my responsibility to report back. However, if we're not all asking the same questions and we're not working off of a common script, the information that's going to come back is going to be disjointed and might not actually be the information that the superintendent needs to know. Does she need to pivot? Does she need, it's not helpful to the superintendent with the work that she's doing every single day. It's not helpful to the board to really understand what's going on with the community as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. So doing that, and I hear the intent behind it, behind the make it your own, and hearing from individual districts. The intent was a positive one for sure. The impact probably less effective than what you intended. But you gave it a whirl, and now you are continuously improving. But yeah, to your point, when you're not asking the same questions, not giving the same information, baseline information to receive communication back, then that disjointedness happens. There's not a way necessarily to synthesize that information to make a meaningful next step or what needs to happen next from here, because it's all over the place. Or they might have answered a question in even just how a question is asked can really, you might think you're asking the same question, the way you frame it can elicit a whole different response in one place than another. And it's important it might seem really nitpicky or whatever, but there's that consistency is important both for how it's received and how different segments of the community feel that they have been asked to participate, and what you want everyone to have the same opportunity toward participation, but then also on that back end of what you're able to do with the information and how useful it is. So having following the same script is really, really helpful in that.
Sophina.
Josefina.
So this is precisely, I mean, we're still in continuous improvement mode. And I think community engagement is one area where we need to tighten up and to get really specific about the purpose. I think that's the next step for this board, is getting super specific about what are those questions. It would be helpful for all of us to have that, have input, first of all, as to what questions we want to ask, how we want to ask them, what information would be helpful. Like, we know that interims have got to be a topic for clarification. When we talk about board work versus superintendent work. And so, yes, we need to do a better job of choreographing our community outreach, or excuse me, and we got to get our vocab right too, consistent. Because for us, community engagement has in the past meant we go out in pairs. Community outreach is a different protocol, and I think it would be helpful to have that in writing. And maybe town halls are yet something else. Um, but clarity, right? And details
Yeah, so,
are part of our continuous improvement.
and I think as you work toward whatever that scripting is going to be, just like in your initial going out, the board's initial going out to the community, that there can be support with some of that scripting and getting the input from all board members and having that clear, concise, and the understanding there for all board members. And let's see. And then finally, the idea of frequency, doing it at least twice per year, keeping that cadence going so that the community really can take ownership, for one thing, of goals and guardrails and has the opportunity to be heard. And that you all have the opportunity for that continuous communication about goals and guardrails and about the board's work and governance work, and having a mechanism for feedback is critical, so that one, you are collecting the feedback, but also you're closing that feedback loop, letting the community know what you heard, what you're doing with that information, just that constant two-way communication feedback loop. And then the final thing on there is avoiding election cycles. As you get ready, part of engaging with the community and doing that education piece is doing candidate pre-boarding sessions, candidate training sessions. What we usually recommend is that anybody who's going to be on the ballot not be present at those as board members, just because that's something that I've gone through, where when I've been on the ballot, I was not a part of the community training. If I wanted to be there, I was a candidate, not a board member. But being very cognizant of that as well. Any questions about any other questions about these bullet points in front of you?
It's not a question, but real quick, in the definition of engagement and outreach, it does say that engagement and outreach are about the community's vision and values. So we just have to remember it's about board work.
Yep.
That's not here. Like, it doesn't say here that it's about vision and values and board work. And so I think that's really important too, that we're not going out and doing community engagement about superintendent work.
Right.
So,
yep, that's a good point. And that's something that we can add to the bullets. But yes, the board engages the community about board work. The superintendent engagement with any community or stakeholders is about superintendent work. So thank you for making that distinction. And there are no other questions. I know we have 10 minutes left, it looks like, maybe just a little over. I guess, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. So, am I on? Can you hear me? Okay. So what I handed out was a community engagement ad hoc committee review. Oh, let me here. To pass it on. So what I did is I created a like a process review for what the community engagement ad hoc committee has done. This committee has been in existence for about 2 years now. And so I just kind of went back to look at, you know, what we've done, what we've accomplished. Are we aligning with the documents from the student outcomes focused governance documents? And so just kind of just wanted to kind of touch on that. So just in the sense of what has worked, I think what has worked really well is we have established now standardized events that have become part of the APS, dare I say, ethos. That these are things that we're going to be doing routinely. So one of them, for example, is the superintendent's now annual State of the District address. That was created by the board in conjunction with the superintendent so that we are going out and having those transparent conversations. We've adopted, we already have a 2-year community engagement calendar. One thing that's coming is that calendar is going to be ending, so we need to adopt a new 2-year calendar moving forward. That will be coming in April. I think another thing that has worked well is we've had committee membership rotation. So while the chair, which is me, has remained constant, we've had committee board members rotate through as committee members as a way to kind of continue to bring fresh perspective. And I think probably one of the biggest things that we've done is we've created committee goals that align with our board goals. And this goes to the conversation that we've been having about really making sure that we're not engaging those people that are easiest to access, that we're engaging people and bringing people to these events that really we need to hear from if we're going to make our goals. So the committee has 3 goals not as committee members. Like, I should say that it's not the 3 people that sit on the committee that are responsible for this, but the whole board agreed that that we were going to work towards those. So I think those are some things that have worked really well. Some of the challenges that I see just in my review is that we are still having a hard time balancing structure and board member preferences. And I'll just read it. Creating a process that accommodates all 7 board members while maintaining consistency has been difficult. And I think I alluded to is the district town halls is probably the most recent example of that, is that you have 7 different personalities, but we need to have some consistency. And we've talked about this staff involvement. What really is the level of staff involvement that is required or necessary? Our tracking is still a little off. We have a few different tracking documents. We probably need to consolidate those, but there really is a question of who's responsible for tracking their involvement. Is it me as the chair? Probably not. It probably should be each board member responsible for tracking their involvement. And then this is what we were just talking about. Clarifying community engagement versus community outreach. There is still confusion about the distinction between these 2 concepts, even though community engagement and community outreach, those specific definitions have been on every single document that we've sent out. So but there's still some confusion about that. And then as far as next steps are concerned, the training and retraining of our roles and responsibilities, I'm thinking that today definitely was just another retraining on what are our roles, what are our responsibilities. We need to, again, make sure that we understand our differences between customer and owner. And you've already alluded to this, but this is on our implementation calendar, that we are going to host intensive training sessions for future school board candidates to ensure alignment with board governance policies. So we have that on our calendar already as a board to do that. But this process doesn't work unless those new people coming on really, like, not just, and I think Janelle, I'm looking at her, but like, you guys had a introduction, but you didn't have a training as to what it really was. And so we need intense training before you even come onto the board. we're gonna have 2 regional town halls that are coming in March, where we're going to do what use a common script with specific questions. And this is where we're gonna really focus on, this is our opportunity, not only to talk about our progress towards goals, but also to use this again as an opportunity of, this is what the board does, this is what the superintendent does. I've already talked about, we will have a 2-year engagement and outreach plan coming to the board in April. The meeting minutes are now, they actually have been linked in the at-a-glances. Whenever we've had a meeting, the agenda and notes have been linked. So anybody who wants to read what we've been doing, it's actually been in probably the last few months worth of at-a-glance. So that's all there. But we will continue to do that. And I spoke to this earlier, but we do need to really work on broadening our community involvement beyond APS staff and families. Some of the ways that we've already started working on that is with partnerships with outside organizations. And I do want to take this opportunity to thank and highlight Dion's. Yes, Janelle she's got her little name tag. I want to thank Dion's because, first of all, they have made name tags for all of us so that when we go out to events, we are recognized as board members. They have also very generously given us a stack of Dion's gift cards that we can use at our engagement events as giveaways. And they have thirdly, again, very generously offered the use of their facilities so that when we want to have community engagement events, we can do it at Dion's. And that is another way that we're not, parking ourselves in schools and getting the same people. We're really reaching out to a broader community. So I'm just so thankful to Dion's for doing that. And I think that is a quick review of the Community Engagement Ad Hoc Committee.
Thank you. If I could just add 2 finer points. So we had initially discussed having a conversation amongst the board around how we want to specifically implement this going forward, but didn't have the time within this training. So when Member Jackson describes a 2-year engagement outreach plan will be presented to the board in April, it'll be presented to the board. We'll have opportunity for board discussion, feedback, input, everything. And then we're putting it to a vote in May. So May, I can't remember the dates. It's like April 16th or April 2nd is the board meeting, and then May is the vote. But those are scheduled on upcoming board agenda. So there will be time for lots of input, but we'll come in with a recommendation from the committee. The other thing is that per our SOFG implementation timeline, we do have a task to impanel an ad hoc committee to develop a robust process for training and onboarding new board members prior to being sworn in. And so we will also impanel a committee that'll be different from this community engagement committee to develop that. So that'll be forthcoming also.
Does that happen once they're elected or prior to being elected?
Prior. Well, both, but primarily prior.
Before they file?
So that's for the committee to discuss and determine. The question was before they file. What we are thinking is yes, because our filing deadline is so late. August 14th or something.
So it sounds like this community engagement ad hoc committee review and steps moving forward there's going to be ample opportunity for board members, for you all to talk about it, board members to weigh in before anything moves forward, and then a new ad hoc around the candidate training. So sounds like you have some definite plans for next steps to move the work forward. And just before we end today, if we can just go around and what is one insight or takeaway from today's discussion that you will apply to your role as a board member or as a superintendent? Who will go first?
I can go first. I think after this training, I realized that we are doing a lot of good things already, and we're on track. And as a board member, I think my biggest thing is sticking to the script and really focusing on how we make an impact as a district to actually provide feedback that is going to benefit the superintendent.
Yeah. So sticking to the script and finding a way to elicit feedback that will actually be helpful to the superintendent. Thank you. Just go around the horn.
Okay, sure. So maybe not necessarily about today, but as a larger self-reflection on this is as the chair, sometimes I think I completely understand what is happening, and I think maybe sorry, I understand what I'm trying to communicate. Maybe it's not being communicated or not being heard in the way that I mean it to be communicated. So I am going to make sure that as we move forward with some of the events and engagements that we have, that I am maybe more specific about what the intent of the committee is.
So using some of your reflection on how your own understanding and being more precise and specific with communication to the rest of the board so that they understand the intent of the committee. Yeah, thanks. Crystal?
Biggest takeaway was seeing that the information today has maintained its consistency from information we've had prior, and I appreciate that we didn't deviate from the plan because that would stress me out. So I appreciate that all of the content is still consistent, it's precise, and we're still on track based on what we're doing. And I appreciate the reminder. Stay on track.
Yeah, so consistent information and we're on track. Good reminder to stay on track.
I want to thank everyone who has previously or is currently serving on the Community Engagement Ad Hoc Committee, which is 6 members so far. So thank you all, because collectively we're creating this work, even though there is one chair. So an opportunity for everyone to engage and provide feedback. So thank you all for that. And I think a takeaway or a commitment that I have is just really thinking about accountability and shared responsibility. I think how we collectively make sure that we as a board and I as an individual are doing what we said we would do.
For that collective responsibility, both as a board, but as an individual, I am doing what I said I will do. Yeah. Let's go to Josefina and then we'll go to Dr. Blakey. Oh, you're on mute.
A takeaway for me is a few. First, something that you said towards the end here that prompted, someone said, providing, I think it was Janelle, providing community engagement feedback to the superintendent. That is helpful. But it occurred to me, we've published, or at least I published my feedback from the engagement. It would be helpful to hear, and this is perhaps at our monthly meeting with Dr. Blakey, it's helpful to us to know what is helpful, what from that feedback was helpful and what was not, right? Again, just to tweak the process. And just some final thoughts. I think all of us, and I mean all of us, want to do this right. And so we have a guardrail. It's the very first one that board members, and I'm talking about board guardrails, that we should not make assumptions about what we're doing or not doing. And I would ask that we simply ask, what are you doing with your community engagement, and maybe debrief, be part of thinking through, helping each other to think through what we're doing rather than assuming what we're doing. So
So honoring the
that's
board
it.
about not making assumptions and having the conversation rather than making assumptions, having the conversation with board members to understand what's happening.
What's actually happening, and that's not to say that there won't be corrections, but giving one another the benefit of the doubt about how we're doing our community engagements.
Right. Giving each other the benefit of the doubt. And I think it sounds like that board guardrail covers this and multiple things. And then I think it sounds like also the plans going forward for that consistency. So it'll be less of an issue, but as far as how the community engagement, that clarity and consistency that you had mentioned before, Josefina. So thank you. Dr. Blakey.
I appreciate the description of the difference between the owners and the customers, because what I've been worried about with some of the community engagement is that it appears that the administration and the board aren't working together. So the board's going out to get information, and then I do listening sessions too. And so if you get too much information, kind of I liked what you said at the beginning, if you get too much, then you actually can't do anything with just a lot of information that's disjointed. So I appreciated the distinction between the superintendent getting feedback from the customers and the board getting feedback from the owners at a higher level. Of what I took away when you were talking is perceiving like themes that the board gets from their outreach sessions, and not like a task list of, I went to this session and here's everything that this individual, people want. And so I think if we really work to distinguish that difference of the owners and the customers and the themes that the board brings me and the to-do list that I get from my own listening sessions when I go to schools, I think would help us be able to address a lot of the issues.
Yeah. So continuing with that distinction, and making sure that we're not gathering too much, but that
Right.
what we are gathering is beneficial. Want to play along, Joanna? I don't want to leave you out. Okay. Thank you all for having me here today. It's been a pleasure. And please don't hesitate to reach out. And Ashley, as you know, is always available, and I'm happy to answer any questions that I can as well.
Great. Thank you. And our next Board of Education meeting is Wednesday, March 5th here at 6400 Uptown Boulevard, and also live streamed at aps.edu. And